Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to the Simplifying Device Retirement and Refresh webinar. This is going to be kind of a fun one, and we're really excited that you've joined us. My name is Sam Weiss. I'm a solution partner manager at Jamf. So companies that want to integrate with Jamf or work with our APIs or offer something that's greater than the sum of its parts generally work through me and my team. And I'm joined by Mark and Jeremy.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeremy Yeager, CIO at Diamond Assets. We're a trading company focused exclusively on Apple devices.
Excellent. So we've got a lot of really great knowledge here. Mark is a technical relationship manager for some of our largest, most strategic customers, and Jeremy and Diamond Assets have seen every aspect of a refresh. So we're really excited to offer some really great knowledge in this space. So some things that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start with what is the importance of modern Apple hardware for your organization, for your users, for their experience joining your organization. We're going to talk about some best practices for Apple device retirement. If you've been to a Jamf webinar in the past, we focus so much on zero-touch deployment and getting devices out into the world. It's not often we have a chance to talk about device retirement. We're specifically going to focus on some Jamf Pro workflows that will help you simplify this refresh process. And at the end, we're going to talk about a very cool integration developed by Diamond Assets that works with Jamf Pro to make the device refresh process even simpler and lets you stay inside your favorite MDM to get all that done. And for those of you that are joining us for your first Jamf Pro webinar, welcome. Since 2002, Jamf has been helping organizations succeed with Apple. And our 35,000 customers range from SMB to enterprise, K-12 to high ed and beyond. And truly anywhere Apple devices are embraced as first-class citizens. And we do that with a range of products, but today we're going to focus on our flagship mobile device management tool, Jamf Pro. And so Jamf Pro is a complete lifecycle management for the Apple ecosystem. So from initial zero-touch deployment to the ongoing patching and management of software and operating systems, Jamf Pro gives IT professionals the tools they need to successfully administer a fleet of Apple devices. And as I previously mentioned, I think this is an interesting topic because we've thoroughly covered new device onboarding and zero-touch deployments. But as our customers' fleets grow and as they mature, some of our customers are encountering their first refresh and upgrade cycle for their Apple devices. And we want to give some insight into how to make that even easier. So just to kick things off, let's talk about why your organization might decide to refresh your Apple hardware. So first and foremost, Apple devices keep getting faster and more performant and more mobile. And each version is more capable and powerful than the last. But there have been several distinct upgrades that really benefit the mobile workforce. And I know it's 2020, it feels like we shouldn't really be having this conversation, but solid state drives. They offer speed and reliability, especially for workers that commute or travel. And I think this is still worth mentioning because Apple still supports the latest operating system on the last mobile computer they manufactured with a hard drive, but that's not a good reason to keep them in your environment. Additionally, cellular and Wi-Fi chips continue to adopt new standards and have higher overall bandwidth. And with so many of our applications having to sync to the cloud, these types of improvements, just as an example with Wi-Fi 6, help with dense wireless populations. And again, things that severely impact our mobile workers. And when IT thinks through the life cycle of a machine, the required IOs and accessories definitely factor into the equation as well. There's a human and a capital cost associated with having to support all the multiple adapters and dongles across multiple generations of Apple devices. So being able to focus your support will allow you to keep more of the right equipment around, leading to a better IT experience. And as we all know, batteries have a lifespan. And for a mobile worker to always be in search of the next power outlet or Starbucks can be exhausting and doesn't really allow for the flexibility that remote workers demand. And probably one of the most important things is modern Apple hardware supports current Apple operating systems.
And Sam, if I can add, modern hardware ensures that it can run current software for opportunities that brings. And that brings everything from new software capabilities to everything that we deal with around security. Making sure that we have a current operating system on that device helps us eliminate potential security threats and really gives our users new capabilities and possibilities that new hardware brings.
And just kind of vamping on the additional capabilities that new Apple hardware and operating system brings. On the screen, these are just some of the features that have OS or hardware requirements from Apple. And these range from nice to have to extremely critical, and probably include a few features that you as an Apple consumer use every day. So as an example, what would life be like without AirDrop? And from an education point of view, how effective can devices be if they don't support Apple's latest education features like the Classroom app or shared iPad? And if students as well as factory workers alike are supposed to be taking advantage of augmented reality apps in their respective roles, are they getting the most out of Apple devices that might not be able to support that experience? And if you're in healthcare, but your nurses and doctors don't have devices with Face ID or Touch ID, how much time might be regained by embracing new technology? And when we think about it from the Jamf perspective, there's certain operating systems and ways that you purchase hardware that determine what MDM capabilities that you have. So as an example, if a Jamf admin didn't have modern devices, you might not be able to do things like device-based app assignment, or maybe even enable lost mode. And for automated enrollment devices, the ability to push OS updates more easily, all really lends itself to the need to have modern hardware. But this also goes beyond the features of the device, because many organizations strive to attract and retain top talent at their organizations. So offering user choice and fresh technology is one of the ways that organizations look to differentiate themselves. But sometimes it's not even about fresh tech, it's about the right tool for the job. So as an example, iPad OS is bringing a desktop class experience to mobile workers. And after you do your own user testing, you should find out for yourself what the best modern tool set are. And personally, having spent plenty of time around students and employees and consumers opening up their new Apple devices, I can say without a doubt that it's a special moment and is very different than than a new employee being handed a device that's covered in fingerprints and is in questionable shape. We've heard from schools, as an example, that breakage rates are lower when the end user is a part of the setup process versus being handed that pre-configured device. And using technology to help drive your onboarding experience is an important consideration as well, and something that Jamf has very thoroughly covered in multiple webinars. But it goes beyond that. Another reason an organization will refresh their devices at a standard cadence is not only to stay current, but to truly realize the lower total cost of ownership of Apple devices. Mac is less expensive than PC, and it's for a few reasons. The support costs are lower. There's more built-in security tools. But most importantly, Mac has a high residual value associated with it. In fact, Fletcher Previn, the CIO of IBM, said that they see savings of $270 to $543 per Mac compared to a comparable PC in a 4-year total cost of ownership model because of the residual value of that device at the end of 4 years. And that story doesn't just stop with the Mac, it also goes to Chromebook as well. When you factor in everything across the life cycle of a Chromebook, iPad is less expensive because it has the built-in classroom management tools that you'd have to contract from a third party. It offers native accessibility tools, and automated enrollment in Apple School Manager are free deployment services that don't necessarily have equivalents in the Chromebook world. But most important for our conversation, they have a high residual value and a strong secondary market.
Sam, I would add with Chromebook right now, it's really a closed market. Chromebooks were really designed specifically for education. So from a trade-up standpoint, there really isn't the demand like we see for Apple products on a secondary market. So what do we do with retired hardware? There have been all sorts of historical options when it comes to retiring your equipment. People have done things like physical destruction, but this was typically done to deal with data destruction and really isn't cost effective when you account for the high residual value of Apple devices. People have also tried selling it themselves. These past options were really problematic for a few reasons. Number one, you still have to do it. So in the case of selling equipment back to employees, putting it out on eBay or Craigslist or some sort of auctions, you're still doing all the work, which we know time is money. And there are repercussions and possible perception issues when it comes to selling these things directly. You'll still have to maybe provide support, even though you said you wouldn't provide support. How will they feel when that laptop works just fine for them? They could look at that and say, hey, if it works for me, why doesn't it work well for my kids yet? Why won't you just give me a raise instead of buying new Apple hardware? You guys have got lots of things to do, such as getting your new deployment done. These options really haven't been great, but you do have the option to choose a refresh partner. And in our case, we do all of that work for you. We look at taking care of half of the deployment while you guys can worry about getting your new deployment done with Jamf. So if you're going to retire old equipment, let's make retirement easy and work with a partner like Diamond Assets. So in terms of device retirement best practices, the thing here is that when we look at retiring a device, every time we do this, a new opportunity is presented. We're actually pretty lucky because we can define this opportunity each time we go through a cycle or refresh. It can be done different each time. It might be new software deployment tools. Things evolve and change over time. We get to do this and think about what the lifespan means to the user, to the organization, and ultimately how it impacts the experiences that they have. Components such as software, hardware, data, people, and process really shape this experience. It's more than just this hardware lifespan that we think about, buying a new Mac Pro, buying a new iPad, so on and so forth. It's about the software as well. What are we going to need in the next 2 to 3 years? How does that shape our vision for hardware? How does it shape the requests and what we're going to purchase? And do you think that's going to require more being more fluid in the future? And then in terms of dealing with data destruction, are there older policies that need to be addressed or changed? We've worked with lots of organizations who have gone down physical destruction route before because they've got a policy that states that, but there are lots of software solutions that can help with dealing with data destruction. The best practice here is to have as much data and information as you can. As an example, at Diamond Assets, we know that what your current fleet is worth. We have projection modeling for the equipment that you're going to be purchasing, and this really helps drive data-driven decisions when we look at financing options and purchasing. Ultimately, leverage, residual value. And remember that technology is not like fine wine. You don't get more money just because it's old, unless it's an Apple One on eBay.
So now that we've talked about the overall considerations of a device refresh, Mark is going to tell us a little bit about device retirement workflows, specifically within Jamf Pro.
Thanks, Sam. So inventory, automation, and self-service are all functions of Jamf Pro that you're familiar with for deployment. But let's take a look at how these same tools can be used in a device retirement process. We've drawn up a list of some suggested order of operations of steps you can take to do this, really with the idea of working with those devices in your inventory and getting them securely removed from your environment as well. So first, we'll be looking at, once you've decided which devices are going to retire, how are you going to organize them within Jamf Pro to take those next actions? Do you have them in Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager? And what do you need to take care of there as you're removing devices? And then the data that's on the devices. What sort of considerations do you need to think about for your organization for either regulatory purposes, personal information, etc.? And then finally, just cleaning up, getting unneeded data out of your Jamf Pro server, freeing up licenses. And we can take a look at all of these steps here through this process. So firstly, organizing those devices that are going to leave your environment. How good is your inventory data as far as where these devices are at? Really, it's something that you may want to consider having those devices pass through some sort of physical inspection, whether it's a tech who's adding a extension attribute flag so you can track it in a report, adding to a static group so you can take action on them, or even self-service policies can be run where a user hits a button for a policy and that adds that device to a group where you know that it's going to be one of those devices that's going to be retired. When you're working with this data, really any time you're working on an advanced search or a group, you have that export option to use it as a CSV file to work with other systems such as Apple School Manager and Apple Business Manager. Once you have those CSV files and you know which devices you're going to remove, then you would consider how you want to have it released or unassigned from Apple's deployment programs. And really, there's two main actions that can take place when you're doing mass actions here, and that's either an unassigned action or a release action. And it's important to consider perhaps a two-step process. Releasing a device is a permanent action. That's going to be something that you might want to do further down the line once you've received confirmation from your reseller partner that those devices have all reached them as well. But it's important to do this step early in the process because it prevents unintentional re-enrollment into Jamf Pro. So you don't need to go back and remove the devices a second time. It's also important to note that unassigning devices from an MDM server doesn't actually remove the Jamf management profile. So this can be done in advance of your cleanup or automation workflows to retire those devices. Next, I'd like to call out specifically firmware passwords. This is a password that can be set on the device firmware level, preventing a device from starting up to, say, the recovery partition, booting to a different operating system. And it's very important to have this removed before you transfer ownership of any macOS device. So firstly, knowing which devices have firmware passwords, you can leverage inventory for that. Yes, it's possible to manually remove a firmware password by booting to the recovery partition, but it's also worth noting that if you set a firmware password with the Jamf Pro policy, it's actually pretty easy to remove it. So here's a little trick. If you originally set that policy, clone it to make a copy of it, and then simply switch the set password option to the remove password. And even though that password is obscured by little bullets, that's something that Jamf Pro remembers it, even if you forgot it, and it can then remove that password. So how do you want those devices to look when they leave your hands? How are you going to erase them? What sort of state do you want them to be in when it leaves? So there's several different paths. Firstly, on macOS, you probably have the most options, whether it's scripts, applications that can restore an OS using self-service as triggers. And it can also be as simple as a remote mass action. Think iOS devices especially here. This is a very easy step where in one mass action, you can wipe a device and clear activation lock with Apple servers all in one mass action. It's important, however, not to use that one when you're doing a macOS wipe, because that does actually set a firmware password on there as well. So for macOS, you'll probably want to do something more along the lines of a policy to erase or an action like that. It's also worth noting workflows on this slide can and do have entire webinars of their own. So please check jamf.com for a back catalog of webinars and blogs on these topics. Review your organization's policies, Apple's platform security guide, and consult with your refresh partner to find the best path to meet your needs. And this is certainly a topic that they're going to be very well versed in.
I was just going to add from, you mentioned refresh partner. On our end, if there are things that you're needing, we can provide. By standard, we provide audit trails of all of our devices as they go through our system in terms of serial numbers, so on and so forth, and the grading for those devices. But we also log erasures, so on and so forth. So if those are things that are pieces or requirements that you have, know that we can provide those to you as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. I was hoping you'd chime in there. So now that those devices are prepared and probably even starting their journey on their next adventure, let's do some housekeeping in Jamf Pro. This can be done either by mass actions of either deleting device records or simply unmanaging groups of devices. Maybe you want to keep historical data of who had what device last, and maybe you don't want to delete the devices. That's fine, because really it depends on how you want to track that. And either way, you're freeing up a Jamf license for the new devices that you're about to deploy in their place. So let's take a look through this workflow here. I've got a device group here with different members that I'm taking action on, sending a remote command to them, and then choosing the remote command of unmanage this device. A nice safety net within Jamf Pro is that there is a confirmation of, hey, are you really serious you want to do this, to how many devices? So enter in that number to confirm that you are going to wipe or unmanage those devices, and let it happen. So assuming at this point you followed that audit trail, your refresh partner has given you a list of devices that have fully been received and ingested into their systems, now's the time where it's truly safe to remove those devices and release them from Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager. Again, one of these mass actions of uploading a CSV file, they're going to be your friend while you manage these data sets through these options. And this can be done either manually in this interface or through the Jamf Pro API as well. So just to recap here, broadly, once you've determined which devices you're retiring, organize them within Jamf Pro as you see fit. Use Apple School Manager and Apple Business Manager to unassign them from management, and really think about how those devices, how you need to have them leave your chain of custody, automate that as needed, and then do some cleanup on the back end. And from a Jamf Pro perspective, you should be all set to receive those new devices and get them deployed in their place.
Great, thank you, Mark. So we've gone through the suggested order of operations, but you might be looking at one of these bullet points and realizing that it's harder than the other ones. And that is determine which devices to retire and organize them. And so for that reason, Diamond Assets partnered with Jamf to develop Clarity. So I'm going to let Jeremy talk us through what this integration is and what it brings to our customers.
Thanks, Sam. Clarity is a free solution and is the result of this partnership and problem solving between Jamf and Diamond Assets. Clarity will give you the capability to combine all the existing data that you have within Jamf with Diamond Assets lifecycle and market data, really painting a clearer picture of Apple fleet management for your organization. Customers have told us they need an easier way to understand fleet lifecycle and the device value that they have for their fleet. With Clarity, we've achieved this. Within minutes, you can create a workflow to push your fleet of specifications to Diamond Assets for analysis. We analyze your information. We return this augmented data set to help build better smart groups and better reporting for your fleet. We return these details on your devices, such as the release date, Apple order number, which is how the market identifies your equipment, OS capabilities, and finally a refresh statement. This refresh statement empowers you, giving you real market indicators when you should look at refreshing your equipment. We offer continual assistance with Clarity, meaning you can ask for updated information at any point in time and import that data back into Jamf, always painting a clear picture of your fleet. And just remember that Clarity is free. Thanks, Sam.
So just a quick visual demonstration of how Clarity works. As we all know, Jamf Pro is the device management tool that you've more than likely chosen. And Clarity is an internal tool at Diamond Assets, and it's a device refresh engine. The way this integration works is Jamf has another feature called automated reporting. And that allows Jamf to create a file that can be automatically emailed either as a one-time process or as a reoccurring scheduled process to anyone that you wish. And if you decide to send this information to Diamond Assets, they will not only send you back a human readable quote on your refresh date, but they will also send back a file that is compatible with a feature of Jamf Pro called inventory preload. And we're going to take a look at this in more detail, but this file then allows devices as they check in to grab additional information such as when they should be sold, as well as that maximum operating system. And all of that drives extension attributes and smart groups, which we'll take a look at in just a second. But if you haven't played with any of those features before, let's start with automated reporting, which is the way that we send inventory information with Jamf Pro. As I mentioned, this is something you can either do as a one-time process, or if you have an ongoing relationship with Diamond Assets, it can be scheduled. And this is 100% real-time data, and it's everything that's required for a quote. So no more having to go back and ask for that additional serial number or the capacity or the cellular capabilities of a device. We know that, and we're going to help Diamond Assets quote that out for you. The second step in this process is we're creating extension attributes. And extension attributes are really just custom inventory fields that can either be updated manually or they can be driven by a process such as inventory preload. And these are visible on device records as well as other places we'll see in just a second. When Diamond Asset sends you back that file that's compatible with inventory preload, you really just pull it into Jamf and you upload it. Inventory preload is a very flexible feature of Jamf Pro that's very intelligent when it comes to the merging of records. So this can be an ongoing process that you participate in as well. And the result from all of that is this. So on an individual device record, we're not only going to see a buyback statement, which is when you should consider offloading this device. We also have the maximum OS capability, as well as the date that Apple released this piece of hardware. And this is really where things get interesting. Our admins leverage things like smart groups to group devices in logical order. So when you sign into Jamf Pro and you're using Clarity, it's possible to right on your dashboard see, I have 205 devices that I need to think about refreshing in the next 6 months. And I have just over 700 devices that I need to start thinking about over the next year or two. So hopefully, as you've seen, Diamond Assets and Jamf are trying to solve the three complexities that we see with device refresh. Admins not knowing what they have, admins not knowing about device changes over time, but most importantly, understanding when that peak value for device refresh should be. If you'd like to learn more about Clarity, 2 ways to do it. If you go to jamf.it/diamondassets, you will get the solution brief, which you saw previously. And if you'd like to be contacted by Diamond Assets, you can either reply that on this webinar, or jamf.com/diamond-assets has ways to get in contact with them. Thankfully, your Jamf account executives, Apple, and your reseller partners are probably familiar with this as well. So we'd be happy to engage in a conversation with as many people as is required. So just to quickly recap, we've talked about quite a bit today. Really the importance of modern Apple hardware and what that provides you as IT, what that provides your users, and what that provides your organization in terms of buying power. We looked at best practices for Apple device management, or I'm sorry, Apple device retirement, which is really don't drive it into the ground and get rid of it while there's still residual value. We looked at some Jamf Pro specific workflows to simplify the refresh process. And as Mark mentioned, almost all of those topics have their own webinars as well. So the blog post to this will link to all of those. And lastly, we looked at Diamond Assets' free integration tool called Clarity to Jamf Pro to look at the ways that you could grab refresh data, bring it into your MDM of choice, and make smart data-driven decisions. So with that, I want to say thank you. Not just to the attendees, but also to Mark and the Diamond Assets team for joining us. You can go to jamf.it/diamond-assets. And if you'd like to get in contact with the team, jamf.com/diamond-assets is a great way to do that as well. Thank you everyone for joining today. Looking forward to a further conversation with you if you so desire, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.